Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're embarking on a really fascinating exploration. It's based on material one of you submitted, titled AI-Informed Inquiry into Human Basic Necessities.
Yeah, and this isn't just scratching the surface. We're really diving deep into what we fundamentally need, not just, to get by, but to actually flourish.
Exactly. And the sources we've got, they cover a huge range. Biology, philosophy, ethics, even physics, amazingly.
It's quite the mix. So our mission really is to unpack where these core needs come from, how they've changed over time, and their massive impact across all these different fields.
And we're hoping to find some surprising insights, especially with that AI perspective mixed in. It's about more than just staying alive, isn't it? The source puts it nicely, making life a quality one.
That phrase really stuck with me, a quality one.
Me too. And something that jumped out right away in the intro was this tension. Humanity's made incredible strides, right, in meeting needs. But at the same time, suffering, inequality, they're still so present.
Absolutely. It makes you wonder why that gap persists.
It really does.
And that tension is something we'll definitely keep coming back to. So the plan is, we'll start with the origins, then look at the impact, wrestle with the ethical side, see what the AI angle tells us, think about improvements AI might offer, and finally touch on those bigger existential questions.
Okay, sounds good. Let's get into it then. Where do these basic necessities actually start? The material points straight to biology, right?
That's the foundation. Right at the core, you have the really primal stuff, things we share with pretty much all life. Food, water, shelter, safety, and that drive to reproduce. They're just deeply wired in.
Biological imperatives. And I thought the source's phrase, looking for the way to seize the pain and make their lives longer, really captured that raw survival instinct.
It does, perfectly. Pain is basically that biological alarm system, signaling something's wrong, a need isn't met. And if you look anthropologically, early human societies were essentially built around getting those resources in.
Everything revolved around finding food, staying safe.
Exactly. And things like tool development, even language itself, seem to have emerged directly from those survival pressures. That's what the source calls the alteration of the order of life itself. It's kind of mind-blowing that these huge innovations came from just needing to survive.
It really is, that direct link.
Right.
And biologically, as the source notes, this isn't just learned stuff. It's hardwired, like down to our genes.
Precisely. Evolution has shaped us. Think about the stress response that's pure biology linked to needing security. But then things changed, didn't they, when humans started settling down, farming?
Right. Agrarian societies. That changed the game.
It did. Suddenly there's more food security, relatively speaking. And that seems to open up space for what the source calls higher order needs. Things like social structure, rules, wanting knowledge.
The listener called it becoming, well, healthy in the material world. It's like our needs expanded beyond just not dying.
Yeah, and it's interesting how the source suggests that meeting those basic needs actually fuels the drive for these more complex things. Like comfort doesn't just bring contentment, it breeds complexity.
That's a really interesting thought. Success created new kinds of needs.
Exactly. And that leads us straight into philosophy, doesn't it? Why do we even have these needs as, conscious beings?
That's the big question. Are they just quirks of our biology, how our brains work? Or is it something deeper about being alive and aware?
Well, some philosophical views, the teleological ones, suggest needs have a purpose, like pushing us towards flourishing, becoming our best selves. The listener's comment about life dictating survival and quality fits that idea.
Like life itself is aiming somewhere better.
Sort of, yeah. But then you have the more mechanistic views, natural selection, just favored traits that helped us meet needs and reproduce, no grand design needed. They're just emergent properties.
Things that worked, stuck around.
Pretty much. And the source makes a sharp point about today, how getting basic needs met is so tangled up with money, with accumulating stuff. It's almost like wealth itself feels like a basic necessity now.
Yeah, it's become this massive driver, maybe overshadowing the actual needs sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, so fascinating origins in evolution. But the source argues these needs affect, well, practically everything. That quote was huge. All aspects of life and circumstances, human time, history, genetics, biology, philosophy, physics, mathematics, logic, state of mind, and belief systems.
Wow.
It's a massive list.
Yeah.
But it makes sense, doesn't it? If meeting needs is so fundamental, it's bound to shape everything else. Take genetics and biology again, evolution, sure, but also just daily stuff. Feeling hungry, feeling full, keeping our bodies stable, homeostasis.
Right.
Even epigenetics, how our environment flips gene switches, shows that not having needs met can leave biological marks, maybe even across generations.
And the psychological link feels so direct. Needs met equals feeling generally okay, secure.
Yeah.
Needs unmet. Well, the source links it to anxiety, depression, aggression even. That listener's wish to feel good all the time really taps into that. Absolutely. And things like Maslow's hierarchy, okay, maybe it's not perfect, but it helps visualize how those foundational needs have to be sorted before we can really focus on, say, belonging or achieving things.
Yeah, you can't really worry about self-actualization if you're starving.
Exactly. And then look at history and sociology. Societies organize around resources. Political systems, economic theories, they're often about defining who gets what necessities. Big historical shifts, often driven by fights over resources. Even how we structure human time, our work days. It's often dictated by earning what we need.
So much of it comes back to that. And philosophy, too, you mentioned ethics, political philosophy, arguing about justice, rights, equality. It often boils down to ensuring everyone gets the basics, doesn't it?
Precisely. And religions, belief systems, they often give ways to understand suffering, which is so often tied to unmet needs, and they usually have codes about sharing, looking after others. Even logic and maths. The source points out they likely got a kickstart from practical needs, managing stuff, building things, predicting harvests, modern AI and logistics. Just a super sophisticated version of that ancient need.
And physics, thermodynamics, entropy, the ultimate background rules for everything life does to meet its needs. That listener question: is the universe in basic necessities? It's metaphorical, obviously, but it makes you think about the fundamental constraints, right? Like, energy isn't free.
It does. It pushes us to think about ultimate drivers, even if the universe doesn't need things like we do. And zooming out, the effects on individuals and societies are huge. Health, education, stability versus unrest, it all connects back. The listener's focus on circumstances hits the nail on the head. These aren't abstract ideas, they shape everything.
Totally woven into the fabric of life. Which I guess brings us to the tricky part. The ethical labyrinth, as the source calls it. Because the reality is not everyone gets their needs met, not even close. And that raises some really tough ethical questions.
It really does. The listener asking about ethical implications and why different circumstances, and that really difficult one about cruel people killing other people, it forces us to face the moral side head on. Is getting basic necessities met a fundamental human right?
It feels like it should be. Most ethical systems, international declarations, they seem to say yes, right? There's a moral duty there.
Yes, that's the general consensus in theory. But how to actually make that happen, that's where it gets incredibly complicated. You have different ideas about fairness, egalitarianism, utilitarianism, libertarianism, all saying different things about how stuff should be shared. And global poverty just stares all those theories in the face.
So distributive justice, it's about the fairest way to slice the pie, essentially.
Exactly. How do we share the resources needed for everyone's basic survival and well-being?
And that question about cruelty, it's just horrifying. The source mentions things like psychopathy, dehumanization, power dynamics, but fundamentally it's like a denial of shared humanity, isn't it?
It is. It's acting as if someone else's needs, their very life, just doesn't matter. And the listener's constant return to circumstances. Why are all humans have different circumstances? That's so crucial. We aren't dealt the same hand at birth.
Not even remotely. Where you're born, your family's wealth, political stability, discrimination, it all stacks up, massively affecting access to necessities.
And we need to distinguish, like the source implies, between natural bad luck, like an earthquake, and human-made problems, unfair systems, prejudice. We have a direct responsibility for the human-made stuff.
We do. But the source also had that interesting point. The human circumstances saves basic necessities sometimes.
Right. Good circumstances, strong communities, good education, support systems that can be protective, a safety net. It shows the importance of actively building those positive conditions.
Yeah, it's not just about fixing the bad, but building the good.
And then that question, whose has benefited the most? That pushes us to look critically at power, at history, at systems that allow massive accumulation for some while others lack the basics. It questions the fairness of the whole setup.
It really does. Okay, so origins, impact, the ethical maze. Now let's pivot to the AI-informed inquiry part. What can AI actually tell us about all this?
Well, first, remember, AI doesn't see or understand like we do. It's an analytical engine, right? So its view comes from crunching data, finding patterns.
Okay.
It might define basic necessities by seeing what factors consistently link up with measurable outcomes: survival, health, stability, productivity, education, across huge data sets.
So less philosophy, more
Right.
correlation, an empirical definition based on what works.
Exactly. And doing that, it might uncover subtle links humans missed. It could quantify complex connections. We know maternal education impacts child health, but AI could show exactly how much in different contexts, revealing these like feedback loops. Maybe the biggest thing is showing just how tightly interconnected these needs are. Ah, okay. So it could map out those domino effects. Lack of clean water leads to X, which leads to Y.
Precisely. And AI is good at pattern spotting, logical deduction. It might find hidden causes, maybe bias baked into how aid gets distributed, or patterns in disease outbreaks tied to, say, specific climate conditions that weren't obvious before.
Like finding the signal in the noise.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine an AI tracking food prices, transport disruptions, weather patterns, predicting a famine risk much earlier than we could traditionally.
That could be incredibly powerful.
Definitely. Plus, AI can model complex systems. We could simulate policy changes, what might happen to malnutrition if we did X, or how would changing zoning laws affect housing access. It's about getting a better handle on the system before intervening, which fits that listener's methodical approach.
Right. Understand first, then act. Okay, so AI as a powerful analytical tool, which leads to the next big question. How can AI improve the human basic necessities? And that listener hoped that AI could make life easier where a person could feel good all the time. What's the potential here? The potential applications are pretty broad. Think about getting resources where they need to go. AI could optimize logistics for food, water, medicine, especially in emergencies. Predictive analytics could help anticipate shortages, smooth out supply chains.
That alone sounds huge, particularly for disaster relief.
Absolutely. And in healthcare, AI is already making inroads in diagnostics, finding new drugs, personalizing treatments. Virtual assistants could offer health advice, maybe even basic mental health support where doctors are scarce.
Right.
Education, too, personalized learning platforms adapting to each student, flagging kids who need extra help.
Like a tutor for everyone.
Potentially, yeah. And personalized support for people with disabilities, better disaster prediction and response coordination, maybe even better job matching or personalized training to boost economic opportunity. There's a lot of potential.
Okay, but what about that feel good all the time idea?
Yeah, that's where we need a bit of caution, maybe. Because, as the source hints, negative emotions aren't just bad, they often serve a purpose.
Like fear warns us of danger, sadness signals maybe we need support.
Exactly. A life without that range might feel flat, or we might miss important signals. And there's a risk, maybe, of relying too much on tech for mood management, weakening our own resilience. Aiming for constant superficial happiness might not be the best goal.
Good point. So, AI for well-being, yes, but carefully. Realistically. And the ethical side comes up again here, doesn't it? The source mentioned some big concerns.
Huge ones. Bias is a major risk. If the data AI learns from reflects existing inequalities, the AI could just reinforce them, or worse. Think biased loan applications or healthcare algorithms that work better for one group than another.
Yeah, that's scary.
Then there's privacy using all this personal data. Accountability, who's responsible if an AI makes a harmful mistake affecting someone's basic needs. Job displacement from automation is another ongoing worry. And just losing the human touch in areas like care and education.
So, huge potential, but we need guardrails, ethical frameworks, careful implementation.
Definitely. We need to be really thoughtful, especially when basic needs are involved. But the source did end that section on a slightly more positive note, AI potentially helping us understand each other better.
Oh, right, through things like data visualization, making global inequality really stark and visible, or tools to help bridge language barriers.
Exactly. Maybe by making the problems clearer and communication easier, it could spur more collective action, hopefully.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Now we get to the deep end, the existential frontiers.
Yeah.
Big questions about life, death, meaning.
Yeah, the listener calling necessities accidental was spot on. They're tied to the core of our existence, our being finite creatures. Just the struggle to stay alive, to meet needs, can itself be a source of meaning for some people.
And that listener question, could AI help us grasp that life is all there is? That needs end with death? That's heavy stuff.
It really is. And look, AI can analyze philosophical arguments about materialism or consciousness, sure, but it can't give you existential comfort or definitive answers about life's ultimate meaning. That's beyond calculation. That's human territory, maybe spiritual territory.
Right, it highlights AI's limits. It's a tool, not an oracle. What about Is life itself a basic necessities? That one made me loop back on myself.
It's a bit of a paradox, isn't it? You need to be alive to have needs. So life isn't a necessity like food, but maybe the drive to live is the ultimate foundational impulse behind all other needs, the prerequisite for everything else.
The base layer, yeah. And is the universe in basic necessities? We touched on this. Physics has laws, principles, but not needs like a thinking being does, right?
Right. It operates according to physics, thermodynamics. Those are constraints, operating principles, not desires or needs in our sense. It's more metaphorical.
Okay. And that final thought experiment. Imagine being born with all basic necessities. Is that basic necessities? A real head scratcher.
It is. Does the concept of need require the possibility of lack? If everything's just there, effortlessly, do we even register it as fulfilling a need? Does the striving matter? It touches on ideas of utopia, but also maybe the unexpected downsides of having no challenges. Perhaps struggle, even for basics, is part of the human experience, part of what gives it texture.
Something to ponder. Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. We've gone from biology to philosophy to AI to existence itself, all through this lens of basic needs.
We have, and AI clearly stands out as this incredibly powerful analytical tool, but without the human stuff, consciousness, wisdom, values.
And we had those specific listener questions to synthesize, like freedom while being a basic necessities.
Right, and freedom seems like a crucial meta-necessity. It's the enabling condition, right? It lets you pursue other needs. It has value in itself for dignity, but it's also vital for achieving other kinds of well-being.
Makes sense, like the foundation you build on. Then why human don't teach their kids basic necessities?
Well, maybe we do, but often implicitly, maybe incompletely. There's definitely room for more explicit, holistic education about needs, not just biological, but social, emotional, ethical, and maybe AI could help create better educational resources for that.
That could be useful. And finally, what is physical and what is basic necessities?
Physical needs are the bedrock: food, water, shelter for immediate survival. Basic necessities is the broader umbrella, including the physical, but also psychological needs, social connections, maybe even things like internet access now, for full participation in society. It's about flourishing, not just surviving. And that line keeps shifting with time and tech.
Yeah, it definitely highlights that basic isn't fixed. It evolves. And AI seems like it's going to be a big part of that evolution, both as a tool and maybe creating new needs like digital literacy or AI ethics skills.
Absolutely. So looking at basic necessities turns out to be this incredibly rich way to examine the whole human condition. And AI, it needs to be a partner guided by our values, empathy, justice, compassion, to help us build a world where everyone's needs, in that broad sense, can be met.
So, as you're listening to this, maybe take a moment to reflect on your own life. That interplay between your needs and your pursuit of a quality one life, as the source put it. What circumstances have shaped your access? And maybe, thinking about the ethics we discussed, how could you potentially help foster better circumstances for others? It makes it personal, doesn't it?
It really does. And if any part of this discussion really grabbed you, the philosophy, the AI tech, the social impact, dive deeper. There's so much more to explore in all these areas.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. And a huge thank you to the listener who sent in this incredibly insightful and important inquiry. It's certainly given us a lot to think about.
This is DigitView.